Have you ever heard of a runway excursion? You might not have heard the term, but I'm sure you've seen one happen when you see an aviation tragedy on the news. Today I am going to teach you about what causes planes to crash by diving into the topic of runway excursion. A runway excursion, or RE, is when a plane veers off or overruns from the runway surface while the plane is taking off or landing. Qantas Flight 1 overran runway 21L at Bangkok Airport. The reason this happened was after the pilots touched down, the plane was far ahead on the runway, way past where it should have touched down. The pilots thought to do a go-around, which was not a smart idea. By the time they thought to do the go-around, the plane was already on the ground. What the pilots hadn't realized was that the auto brakes had disengaged. The pilots went along using manual brakes. Therefore, thrust reversers were deployed very late, and the plane finally stopped after the end of the runway in a field. Air France Flight 358 overran runway 24L at Toronto International Airport. It landed 1,200 meters late on a 2,743 meter long runway and simply did not have enough runway to stop, especially on wet pavement. It crashed 300 meters past the end of the runway. Everyone survived. It ended the Airbus A340 14-year clean record. What factors lead to a runway excursion? Pilot error, bad weather, slippery runways, and a mistake in air traffic control. This is an example of pilots disagreeing over what method of landing they want to use. Sometimes pilots can make the wrong decision, and this can lead to an excursion. This is an example of a plane flying through a bad storm. Hopefully it can land safely. This is an example of a plane hitting a lot of lightning. Hopefully it can make it to the ground without crashing. This is an example of a slippery runway. This plane is about to encounter a runway excursion. This is an example of controllers in the air traffic control who just made a mistake. Either a plane did something wrong or it was their fault. American Airlines Flight 587 is an example of how a poorly trained pilot caused a plane to crash. AA 587 took off 2 minutes after Japan Airlines Boeing 747. Due to this error, the flight crew ran into some wake turbulence. The first officer, Sten Molin, was taught to move the rudder to even out from wake turbulence. He moved the rudder too much and the vertical stabilizer tore off the plane. The plane entered a stall and crashed in Queens. This is an example of pilot error, and to prevent future crashes and excursions, training needs to be modified. I interviewed a pilot named Wesley D. Archer. He is a private pilot who flies for fun, not for commercial purposes. We discussed the purpose of air traffic control and how it works. I also spent some time inside his plane and learned about the controls. The main cause of runway excursions is pilot error, and to prevent them, I think companies should reinforce their training courses for pilots. Referring back to Qantas 1, training needs to be updated for wet runway landings. New safety features have been updated after previous runway excursions. For example, after the American Airlines Flight 587 crash, when the vertical stabilizer tore off because the pilot moved the rudder too much, American Airlines installed a cockpit caution warning for when there's too much rudder movement. Although technology and newer safety features have helped pilots depart and land more easily, they shouldn't only rely on this to keep them and their passengers safe. So, the next time you take a flight, Think about how hard pilots and air traffic controllers work to make sure crashes don't happen and you are safe.
Thank you for watching my movie. If you want to learn more, please visit my blog or scan this QR code below.